Hey again. Episode 28, about lifeless love life in the US and or in the West. Today's topic is gonna be about race. The thing is, we all know it in terms of the reasons. Now, I won't be specific, I'll be general on purpose. But we all have an idea race does play a part to some degree. I remember I spoke to one person a while back about this topic that I'm gonna open up, but that person agreed with me. I was like, you know what? When that person agreed with me, I was like, okay, yeah, we all know, even though we don't really talk about it. So, what is there to talk about, right? Well, again, I'm gonna generalize it. Generally speaking, some races are more sexual than others. That's the truth, or that's nature, however you want to call it. Years back, I was this really cool, really good guy. I forgot what motivated him to bring this up, but he told me there was a science experiment, and it dealt with different guys of different races. In this science experiment, it wanted to determine the experiment wanted to determine which guy was more sexually, who had a more craving sexually in the science experiment. It turned out certain races had more of a sexual craving and other races did not. Now you could say, oh Mike, these are individual guys. The truth is, these guys represented their races. When he told me that factual story, I was like, my instinct was right. It was right. Generally speaking, it really depends on the race. There are, really, by nature or genetics, there are certain races that are just more uptight than others, which leads me to the love life. So when it comes to love life or sexual attraction, if you're uptight, you're gonna resist the attraction more so than a person who's less uptight. So, again, if you cross paths with a certain race, they're either going to be more uptight or less uptight. I'm going to say something that's going to sound confusing. I mention all the time US or parts of the Western culture are uptight. So, even though you might be a certain race that's less uptight, who embraces their sexual nature more, you're raised to be uptight. So we're still raised under a certain cultural umbrella that teaches us to be uptight sexually. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how our culture is. Um, it would be interesting if I was specific, but I think for those who are watching, you probably have an idea of which groups or which demographics are more uptight sexually and less uptight sexually. But again, we're all raised under an uptight cultural window. I'll say this. This country, the US, was founded by a certain demographic, right? Which implemented a certain culture. Okay? And fast forward to today. Lifeless, love life. The birth rate is low. I mentioned the 60-30 ratio before. Rejection easily. A guy has to be perfect to even gain a girl's interest. It's interesting because if you're that race that's more sexual, you're conflicted between your nature and culture. It's a clash. It's a conflict. If you go against culture, you're the bad guy. If you embrace your nature, be sure to respect your environment. I don't know if I talked about this before. I've mentioned a bunch of times, right? It's all about nature. Nature's nature. The truth and nature go hand in hand. I've mentioned that I follow my own path. I think I've mentioned that. I think I mentioned how different I am because of that. If you're going to follow your nature, which you should do, respect your environment. Again, though, if you go against culture, you're the villain. But it's a conflict. It is. I keep bashing Western culture. I keep bashing the U.S. in terms of the love life. But look, I mean, I'm American, born and raised here. I understand what it means to be professional and moral and ethical and civilized. There is something to that. Yes, the entire world is raised to be professional and civilized. However, we do things a certain way here. I do appreciate that. I appreciate the professionalism that I was raised under. It's just, as I mentioned, I think before, when you're here, we're overly professional and overly civilized, So if you're one of those people who again embraces your nature and you're a certain race that is more sexual than another race or other races, this is gonna sound funny or quirky. At least be professional about it. You don't want to let go completely of the culture that raised you. If you know the culture that raised you, I'm not saying, I'm gonna sound confusing. I'm not saying you're raised the right way. But if you know the culture you're raised under, if you know if you know the culture you're raised under gives you structure, I'm gonna use the word structure. Right? If you know the culture you're raised under gives you structure, okay, you don't want to let go of that. You don't. if you're the other race that's uptight sexually, alright, you got two things going against you, and I'm going to provide you one suggestion. So, by genetics, you have a low sex drive. And you were raised to be uptight sexually. You got two things going against you. I just mentioned it, okay? So here's my suggestion. Train yourself to be a little edgy. Because if you're a little edgy, you're living life. If you're uptight all the time, you're not living life, even though you think you are. And girls, even though I've said girls are uptight, they do appreciate edgy guys. The female appreciates an edgy guy. Okay, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the past. There's a stereotype that girls prefer the bad boy. Look, there's some truth to stereotypes, okay? Nice guys finish last. There's some truth to that. In fact, I might make a video on the bad boy. Maybe. We'll see. I mean, I've talked about the con man and the man of power. But again, if you're an uptight, and I know it's gonna coming up on 12 minutes. If you're an uptight person, some of it is race. Some of it is how we were raised as Americans. I urge you, one suggestion. Train yourself to be a little edgy. Have a little bad boy in you. You get to live life better that way. Life's a little entertaining that way. And again, females appreciate an edgy guy. They do. Even though I get it, a lot of girls in this country or parts of the West are uptight. Uptight girls will freak out for any reason. But the female appreciates a little bad boy. Alright, so if I confused you, I apologize. But again, this episode was or is about race. And I think we all know it. And I told you about the science experiment earlier. Certain races are less sexual than others. Others are more sexual than other races. Nature. Just how it is. Unless you're a mixed race, then you probably understand both sides. Alright. Over 13 minutes. Whoa. This was overtime, but I appreciate talking about this. Thank you for watching, whoever you are, wherever you are. I appreciate it. Stay tuned for episode 29, right? Next one is 29.